Big Apple Blitz with Anthony Rivardo and Matt O'Leary.
What is going on? Welcome back to another episode of Big Apple Blitz. Matt O'Leary, Anthony Rivardo. Anthony, how's it going, my friend?
It's going, man. It's not really the best bye week for the New York Giants. A little bit of depressing times or celebratory times, actually, if you're eager for Daniel Jones to get benched. Sounds like that could happen soon. But on the flip side, for the New York Jets, I don't know if it gets more depressing than this.
No, it really doesn't. There's, we were joking when we just logged on here that I guess we got to talk about this game between the Jets and the Colts because it feels like no one really cares about this game. And there's still 7 games left, too. Like, you essentially have half a season to go, and everyone would rather talk about whether it's a good idea that Aaron Rodgers comes back or not in 2025, or who the next coach is going to be, or the GM, or which way did they go in the draft. And like, I don't know, man. They're not even halfway through November, and that being the conversation for this team is pretty depressing.
Absolutely. I mean, if we're just thinking back on the episodes that we did of this show all the way back into the offseason, I mean, I was so bullish on this team. I was talking 11 wins, possibly 12. I thought that they could set records, and man, I missed the mark. The Jets missed the mark, though, really is what happened here.
Absolutely. They definitely did. I was there with you. I had them at 11 wins, and that looks pretty foolish right now with them sitting at 3-7, but they're taking on the 4-6 Indianapolis Colts this week, and they're somehow 4-point favorites in this game. I get that they're at home. I get the Colts haven't really been all that good, but the Jets have been favored in almost every week the last month, and I don't understand why that is with how poorly they've played. But the big news and the big storyline from this game is the Colts going from Joe Flacco back to Anthony Richardson. So I wanted to start there and see what your impact or what kind of impact you think that makes on this game.
It's really hard to project what kind of impact that makes. Quick point on the Jets being favorites. It is confusing to me just because I don't think that they've earned the right to be a favorite in a single game for the rest of the season. I feel the same way about the Giants, so I'm not trying to throw shade at the Jets, but these two teams, they don't have the right to be favorites in any of these games. Like the Giants were favorites last week versus the Panthers. Who gave them the right? So, but if we're looking ahead to this matchup with the Colts, I think that you would probably rather face Anthony Richardson, in my opinion. I know that I've seen some kind of conflicting opinions of that on social media. Some fans are, upset that they're not facing Joe Flacco, but I think for the Jets, that you do have some talented pieces on defense, even if they're not playing at their highest level right now. And Anthony Richardson's biggest problem, he's inaccurate and he is not necessarily a good processor on the football field. So that's kind of what I would prefer to match up with if I'm the Jets. A lot of teams, when they are down in the dumps and they need a bounce back win, sometimes they get those against struggling rookie quarterbacks. And Richardson's not technically a rookie, but he essentially is after missing the majority of his rookie season. And I just think that that's kind of the player that you would want to exploit if you're the New York Jets defense. Joe Flacco is a seasoned veteran. He also used to be on the Jets, so maybe you could consider that a revenge game if he had to start. So I think that it's a plus that the Jets are avoiding Joe Flacco this week.
Okay. I like that perspective on it. And while I do agree, Anthony Richardson as a passer, incredibly inconsistent. I believe his completion percentage is 44% and change, which is just horrendous. And he only has 10 career starts under his belt. So clearly not someone who's played a ton of football at the NFL level. Why I will disagree with you here on why I think Richardson is a better option for the Colts is his rushing ability and the Jets' inability to tackle seemingly anyone. So I actually think while Joe Flacco is a better passer at this point in Anthony, in comparison to where Anthony Richardson is in his career, I think Richardson being able to move around which is something Flacco can't do. Like he's very, very statuesque in the pocket. He's not moving around. He never really did, but especially now at close to 40 years old. So I thought the Jets pass rush could have a good game, and maybe that's what would keep them in this. But if at the first sign of trouble, if Anthony Richardson could just tuck it down and run and maybe just hit on one of those deep passes down the field that he always seems to attempt a few of in each game, I think that would be enough to be the difference for me. So I worry that the Jets are going to make Anthony Richardson look like 2004 Michael Vick in this game. And that's not something that I feared that they were going to do with going up against Joe Flacco.
That's fair enough. I think you make really good points there, but I don't know. I'm just not a big Anthony Richardson fan. I think that's really what this boils down to for me. I don't think that he's going to look like prime Michael Vick versus anybody. Even if he faced my terrible Giants, I don't think that he's going to have that kind of explosive performance. Like he caught so much social media attention when he slipped and then threw that 65-yard bomb in week 1. And that's really all he's good for to me. Like, I don't think that he's that dangerous of a player with the ball in his hands, even as a runner, because he has such a risk of injury. So I think that even if he's back in the lineup this weekend, which he will be, I don't think the coaching staff is going to encourage him to run the ball too much. And I don't think they're going to call a whole lot of quarterback designed runs. So I just don't think that he is a player who right now is put into a position to find great success. But meanwhile, I think that Joe Flacco, again, as that seasoned veteran, whatever situation he's in, he can be good enough. And so I think that you'd rather just face the inconsistencies of Anthony Richardson if you're the Jets defense, rather than facing a consistently veteran seasoned quarterback in Joe Flacco. So that's where I'm at with it.
Yeah, Rocco asks, you guys don't think that Indy saw the Jets as their next opponent as why they're going back to Richardson? That's why I kind of do, honestly, especially from the running side of things. Plus, it's not like Flacco's looked that great in his recent games. He definitely early on in the season looked like the much better option. But the interceptions have been there. I mean, he threw 3 against the Bills and I believe also had a fumble in that game. So that was a really tough look against a great team, though, mind you. But I don't blame them for making the switch back, especially off a 3-game losing streak. And I do think the opponent comes into play a little bit.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I think that makes a lot of sense. When you've got a struggling team that you're about to face, that's probably when you want to turn to your struggling young quarterback to get back in the lineup. So it does make sense. But again, I don't think that this is necessarily some perfect matchup for Anthony Richardson. I still have faith in some of the talent on the Jets defense. And obviously, like you said, tackling has been a problem. But I don't know. I still think that they have some good pieces there. And I think that it's unreasonable to expect that Anthony Richardson breakout game is going to happen.
Careful, Anthony. You can't say that too loud. Otherwise, Sauce Gardner might at you on Twitter.
Yeah. I don't want him to get in my DMs, threaten to fight me, anything like that. So
what a wild week it's been.
Oh, yeah.
For the Jets. Someone that I'm keeping an eye on in this game is Jonathan Taylor. He's only played in 7 games so far this year, but since coming back from missing time, he's been very productive in 2 out of the 3 games. He had 20 carries for 105 yards and a touchdown against the Texans. And last week against Buffalo went 21 for 114. Talked about the Jets and their missed tackle problems on the defense. They haven't been good against the run all year, dating back to their first game of the season against the San Francisco 49ers. And that kind of set the tone for the rest of the way. Especially going back to Anthony Richardson, I would have to imagine that the game plan would have to be Jonathan Taylor gets the ball 20 plus times again, right?
I would assume so. I think it has to be. But, it's been a little bit funny for Jonathan Taylor. He has had a little bit of inconsistencies throughout the year. Like, he hasn't necessarily been the Jonathan Taylor that we're used to. I think injuries have played a part in that. But, yeah, I don't think that this is the get-right game for Anthony Richardson, but maybe it's the get-right game for Jonathan Taylor.
Johnny Boy wants to know, question for Ant, do you believe that new cornerback coming out of Long Island named Matt O'Leary could make our team better?
Absolutely.
Now, do you know the context behind this?
That I do not.
Oh, okay. So I thought my last joke didn't really land. Sauce Gardner tweeted at me and challenged me to play cornerback in the NFL, and then deleted the tweet 5 minutes after.
Did he really?
Yeah, it's a whole thing. The New York Post wrote a story on it. But what this stems from is after the game, Rich Cimini, who covers the Jets for ESPN, talked about in his article, and like that the caption of his tweet with the article linked was Jets missed 20 tackles. Arguably the most impactful was Sauce Gardner's. So Sauce Gardner quotes tweets it, would eventually delete it, said something to the effect in a sarcastic tone like, yeah, I'm sure my missed tackle in the second quarter for 17 that gave up 17 yards was the difference in this game. Now, to give you full context, it was third down. And if he made the tackle, the Jets would have got off the field. Instead, drive continues and the Cardinals go up 21-6 instead of getting the ball back at 14-6. So I quote tweeted it and I said, I wish Ahmad would log off and take some accountability. And then he tweeted this long thing and at the end added me and was like, I'd love to see you play corner in the league.
Wow. You got under his skin.
I did. Now the beef has been squashed. But people, the lovely Jets Twitter and some of my listeners were photoshopping like my head on Darrelle Revis and stuff like that. So it's been a fun week.
Wow. So now I guess you got to put up the highlight tape. You got to go out there, do some cornerback drills and workouts and show us what you got.
Yeah, I mean, I did that when Zach Wilson held out his rookie year. I had a highlight throwing video, but I don't know. I got to do it for corner. Look at this. CB1. Wow. Matt O'Leary.
Yeah, that's a first-round draft pick if I've ever seen one.
I would think so.
Top 10, honestly.
I have the height. I'm 6'4", but I would probably need to drop like 20 pounds to get to corner weight. If they need like a possession receiver or like maybe slightly undersized tight end, I think I could fill that role just fine, but corner might be tough.
Maybe like a good box safety, you know?
Sure. Yeah, there we go.
Get in the box, make some plays, lay some boom.
That's what I'm saying. More serious question from Johnny, which I'm glad we're kind of going off from this Jets Colts game. We'll give a final score prediction eventually, but I like going into the chat on days like today. Serious question for the panel. If the Jets and Giants do go with the new regime, which current coaches would you keep and why? Is there anybody on your staff that you would like to keep if the Giants do make changes? Or is it just clear house?
Yeah, on the Giants coaching staff, I would definitely keep defensive line coach Andre Patterson. He is tremendous. He deserves a lot of the credit for the development of Dexter Lawrence. Dexter Lawrence was a good player the first few seasons of his career. Then he linked up with Andre Patterson and became one of the best players in the NFL. And then on the flip side, I like Carmen Brasillo, the offensive line coach that the Giants hired this past offseason. I think that his impact is quantifiable, and it's very readily apparent when you watch the games. You can just see the offensive line plays as a unit now rather than five individuals. I credit that to Carmen Brasillo, who has had a tremendous track history throughout his career with the Vegas Raiders, with the Patriots. He always gets the most out of his offensive line talent. Giants offensive line has been their kryptonite for a decade. So those two coaches, assistant coaches, absolutely bringing those guys back no matter who the head coach is.
Okay. I'm going the exact opposite. I hope that no one comes back. I hope that the Jets just completely blow it up. And there's no one really that I feel like that needs to come back. Like, I understand that some of this defensive staff was in a good spot, but I just want whoever they hire as the GM and the next head coach to just bring in all their own guys. I don't care for these losers that have just been here for 4 straight years.
So let's say we get to the end of the year. Jets are doing their head coaching candidate interviews or going through the list, and we get a report leading the way in that candidacy is Jeff Ulbrich. How are we feeling?
Not good. I don't think he can handle it. I really don't. He hasn't looked great through how many games has it been? 5 games, maybe.
Five-ish, yeah. No, he's been terrible. Yeah,
hasn't been great. But anyway, appreciate going through the comments there. It's always fun on times like this. But for the Jets this week against the Colts, we mentioned Richardson. You're saying that you think it's better that the Jets are going up against Richardson than Flacco. So it's for the optimist. What do the Jets have to do to win this game? Or what's the path for the Jets to win here?
Apply pressure to Anthony Richardson. I just don't think he's a good passer. I don't think he's good in the pocket. you get him off his platform, you start to, confuse him. I think also if you want to get even more nuanced, if you're Ulbrich and you're this defensive staff, you got to throw out a lot of different disguised coverages. Just do as much as you can to confuse Anthony Richardson. Just throw a bunch of stuff in his face and see what he can handle. Make him make mistakes, make him beat himself. Like that would be the game plan for me. I think it's very simple. I don't think you can game plan to have a great offense. I think Devontae Adams is hurt too, right? Is that right? I don't think he's going to play this week. So, or maybe.
He was sick.
Oh, he was just sick, so he'll probably play. But I don't know. I was going to bring that up because I'm trying to see some Malachi Corley snaps, trying to see him continue to see the field. But no, I think that this is a game that's won by the Jets defense. If they do win it, it's really just going to have to be about confusing Anthony Richardson as much as you can, applying as much pressure as possible, and forcing him into making mistakes. And then hopefully the offense can capitalize.
Yeah, I think you nailed it on the defensive side of the ball. For me, on offense, I'd like them to lean on Breece Hall more. The last 3 weeks, he's been averaging right around 5 yards a carry, but they've been down and they've gotten away from the run game, I think, too early. Like this past game, he only ran the ball 10 times. He hasn't had one game this year where he's gotten, close to or over 20 carries. I think this would be the week to do it. Just give him the ball 18 to 22 times on the ground and see if you could run it and win the time of possession game.
Yeah, I think that's a great strategy as well. Corley can be an extension of the running game, though. Just have to throw that out there and keep campaigning to get him on the field for my 20-man Dynasty League, which I'm obligated to mention every episode. But no, Breece Hall, it's been a tough year for him, and I don't think the Jets have utilized him properly. I think that's been one of the biggest mistakes of this coaching staff. This pre-Salah, post-Salah, just all about the way that they've handled Breece Hall. It's been confusing. I feel like he should be getting that Saquon Barkley treatment and the offense should just be run through him. And that's just doesn't feel like it's the case. So yeah. This is a perfect game to just force feed him the rock.
So let's do score predictions before we get over to some fun Giants storylines. No game this week for the Giants, but a press conference and a lot of stories to break down. I'm envious of your break. I get that next week. But all right, score prediction. I'm going to go Colts 22-17. I think they win this one on the road. I'm not going to go back to picking the Jets until they show me any sort of consistency. Or just show that they care. Like this last game against Arizona felt like a team that quit and does not care. So until proven otherwise, I'm taking the opposition. And I think Richardson and Jonathan Taylor both have big days on the ground.
Yeah, that's the worst when you get to the point where you can tell the team doesn't care anymore and they stop trying. I've seen that with the Giants several times over the past 6 years, or actually even longer. But yeah, that's always the worst. However, I'm going to go Jets 17-14. I don't think the Colts are a good team, and I'm holding out hope that eventually the Jets just pick one up. I don't think that they're going to be a team with a top 5 pick. I don't think that's realistic. They still do have too much talent on this roster. At some point, they're going to pick up some wins down the stretch here. A very winnable game against the Colts here. I think that they squeeze it out.
A 17-14 win to ruin the draft stock, which, by the way, it's too early to do the ruin the draft stock talk for me, at least on the Jet side of things. Like, I agree. I think they're going to win a couple games down the stretch anyway. So this could be one of them. This absolutely could be one of those games. So anyway, enough on the Jets. Let's go to the other team, the New York Giants. Press conferences. Joe Shane talks. Daniel Jones maybe not starting after the bye. Take it away. Wherever you want to start, we can start.
Hallelujah. I mean, it's not confirmed yet, but it's all but confirmed. I can't imagine a world where Daniel Jones takes another snap with this team, and just thank God. I don't know how I made it through the last 6 years. I said this on Twitter the other day, and I'm going to mention it. Justin Herbert going back to school in 2019 set off a chain reaction that ruined my life. That was my tweet of the week. I was very proud of that one, and I really do feel that way because in 2019, all Giants fans wanted was Justin Herbert to be a New York Giant, myself included. I'm still a huge Justin Herbert fan. I'm going to the Chargers game on Sunday to watch Justin Herbert play. I love that kid. He is awesome. However, he's not a New York Giant because he wanted to play one more season of college football at Oregon with his brother. And when he decided to go back to school, the quarterbacks that were left over in the 2019 draft class included Kyler Murray, Daniel Jones, Dwayne Haskins. Giants end up with Daniel Jones. Past 6 years have been miserable. So Justin Herbert, love you, but you ruined my life. And now hopefully we can move on in a new direction. Now the question is going to be, who's the next quarterback? Is it going to be Tommy DeVito? Is it going to be Drew Lock? I'm hoping to see Tommy DeVito play, but at the same time, a lot of Giants fans don't want that because they don't want to win any more games. And I totally understand that argument. But I just think when you look at this past 10 weeks and you really look at that Carolina Panthers game, that might have been Daniel Jones's worst performance of his career when you factor in the opponent that he was playing. It was absolutely a benchable performance. Like,
Yeah.
It was just offensive to watch as a Giants fan. I don't want to ever see him take another snap.
No, I don't blame you for that at all. I mean, we discussed it on Monday. He was horrible in this game. A couple of really bad interceptions, and that Panthers team. Many consider that team the worst in the league, but after losing to them, now the conversation kind of has flipped to maybe it is the Giants who are the worst team in the NFL. But I don't believe that. I think they are starting the worst quarterback in the league, though, which maybe plays a factor into why they're being perceived as the worst team in the NFL. I'd also like to look at, I'm going to say Drew Lock throw passes to Malik Neighbors because Tommy Cutlitz is fun. He's the official QB1 of the show. And eventually, if they do get to Tommy DeVito, I think he could run the offense a little bit. But it's just felt, at least from an outsider perspective, that Drew Lock has been their QB2 all year, kind of. And at times during training camp, like I know Connor Hughes, who covers both the Jets and the Giants for SNY, was talking about the offense looking better with Drew Lock than Daniel Jones. So I think that would be the next option that we eventually see here.
Yeah, I do think we get Drew Lock, and I think that makes sense. And I'll say this about Drew Lock. I don't think he's a great player. However, the fact that he has a career TD to interception ratio where the interception is the higher number makes me excited to watch him play. And what I mean by that is I am sick and tired of watching Daniel Jones be afraid to throw the ball downfield, so he just tucks it and takes a sack. I want a quarterback who's not afraid to turn the ball over and take risks. Drew Lock is that quarterback. He is going to throw a lot of interceptions, but what comes along with those interceptions? Deep shots downfield, potential touchdowns. So we'll get more touchdowns. We'll get more picks. Again, hopefully that doesn't lead to more wins necessarily for the Giants because we need Cam Ward or Shadur Sanders. We need that top pick. But I do think that we're going to get a major uptick in yardage for Malik Neighbors and increased usage for some of these other guys. I think Jalen Hyatt will finally start to get some receptions in these games. The thing with Drew Lock is even in that week 7, I think it was, fourth quarter that he played against Philadelphia, he looked bad, but those incompletions that he had, almost all of them were anticipatory throws. He was throwing before the receiver was open, before the receiver was breaking. Daniel Jones doesn't even have that ability. He can't anticipate shit. So the fact that we could see some anticipatory throws means we could probably start to get some of these highlight reel receptions from Malik Neighbors and maybe some big touchdowns as well. Again, the interceptions will come along with that. That's fine. I'm so tired of the 180 passing yard, 1 touchdown, 0 interception stat line from Daniel Jones. Give me a quarterback that throws 3 touchdowns and 2 picks. At least I know that the ball is moving and the playmakers are going to be able to have some good days.
Yeah, it's going to make it a little bit more fun. Like in a lost season, that watching a quarterback, like even like a Jameis Winston, who is going to turn the ball over, but is going to try to make things happen. Like, yeah, there's going to be some ugly, rough looking turnovers, but would you rather that? And I think you kind of just answered it. Like, wouldn't you rather that than having to go with, someone who's not going to move the ball? You're going to settle for 6 points. Like, I don't know, maybe score close to 20 because they're scoring touchdowns and they're not having to settle for field goals or drives aren't stalling. And, they're not taking sacks when 2 players are running wide open on 3rd down and 1.
Right, and that's what I was going to mention, this comment from Rocco here about the play on the flea flicker, 2 guys wide open, what happened, sack. The only quarterback on this roster where that play turns into a sack is Daniel Jones. Drew Lock gets that ball out of his hands. Tommy DeVito definitely gets that ball out of his hands. They look downfield and they see open men and they throw the ball. Daniel Jones, I don't know if he's got like an eye problem, if he like legitimately has a depth perception problem and can't see these guys downfield, because sometimes that's how it feels. Maybe he's nearsighted. I don't think he can see downfield. I just don't understand how that ball didn't fly out of his hands and just land somewhere in the middle of the field for one of those 2 wide open guys to grab it. Like he didn't even need to look. He didn't need to be surgical with that pass. Just throw it up there. Those guys were so open. And on top of that, it's not only the fact that he didn't hit one of those open receivers, It's the fact that he took a sack. At least get the ball out of your hands. You have to know the down and distance. It's 3rd and 1. A sack is the last thing you can possibly take. So an incompletion's fine. Then you have 4th and 1. You could just push it and get the first down. And I'm sure that's what Brian Dable's whole game plan was. Take the flea flicker shot on 3rd and 1. If you don't get it, just fall forward for the first on 4th and 1. Daniel Jones takes the sack, absolutely ruins the drive. That kind of quarterback play holds your team back so badly. Drew Lock never takes a sack on that play. That play is probably a touchdown with Drew Lock in the lineup.
Yeah, I love Rico's comment saying Lock's F it, the wide receivers down there somewhere mentality might be what the Giants need, which is exactly what Anthony was just saying there.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, even if you're thinking back to last year when Drew Lock made a couple spot starts with Geno Smith out of the lineup, how about that game that he had against Philadelphia? He had the comeback win against the Eagles. One of those plays that was on the highlight reel in the 4th quarter, DK Metcalf completely covered. He threw it downfield anyway. Metcalf made a play. We haven't seen Malik Neighbors make those plays because he hasn't been given the opportunities. He had the one versus, was it Washington or Cleveland? I think against Cleveland on the left sideline where he pretty much just mossed somebody, and he hasn't been given an opportunity to do that again. So give me Drew Lock in the lineup. He'll throw some of those F-it balls up there. Neighbors will come down with a few of them, and we'll be able to feel really good about where we're headed as a team going forward. And we'll be able to get a bigger picture of this team and say, okay, maybe we really are just a quarterback away. And now we know what kind of quarterback we need to target in the draft to maximize the talent of these playmakers.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. Is there any, and I'm sure there was, but just transitioning it a little bit, what else from the press conference stood out to you and other stories that Joe Schoen brought up other than just the quarterback?
Yeah, the big one that rubbed me the wrong way was Joe Schoen preaching, "We are not far off." That's the quote that he said. I mean, you've got to be kidding me. Like, you have to be more realistic about this team. You are 2-8. You have the worst record in football, and you just lost to the consensus worst roster in football in the Carolina Panthers. To say that the Giants are not far off, well, not far off from what? Maybe I just have a different definition of what far off looks like. Because if we're not far off from, having 5 wins this season, okay, sure, maybe we're not far off from that. But we are absolutely far off from being a contending team. Look at these top teams in the NFC, even in the AFC. They have talent all over the place. The Giants don't even have a single position with a top 5 player. Defensive tackle, sure. But outside of that, a position group, because the DT2 is terrible. You have edge rusher and Brian Burns, who's, I guess he's a really good player. And then Kayvon Thibodeau, I don't know. Is that a top 5 position group? Cornerbacks, definitely not. Offensive line, receiver. The Giants don't have a top 5 position group anywhere. They're just a team devoid of general talent. A quarterback is not going to step in here and have that Jaden Daniels level impact because this team doesn't even have the same amount of talent that the Commanders did going into the season. So to say that we're not far off, I get it. He's got to play his politics when he sits up there during the bye week. I prefer that these guys be a little bit more honest and a little bit more accountable to themselves and say, like, yeah, I have a little bit more work to do on this roster, but we're going to go ahead and get it done and not say we're not far off. And I'm sorry, the last thing that he mentioned that really upset me, he kept referencing the 1-5 in 1-score games. Are we kidding? The Giants were down by like 2-3 scores in the majority of those games and came back and made them 1-score games. Yeah, garbage time points. It's not like they had 2-score leads and then lost by 1 possession. They're always playing from behind. That's not a point to reference to say that we're not far off. That, to me, highlighted how far off this team really is. So ridiculous. I wasn't happy with anything that he said during that press conference. I thought that he deflected a lot. It was just quite honestly embarrassing.
Did he not contradict himself in a way by saying the not too far off comments? Because I thought I saw somewhere else too that they asked him, do you think you did a good enough job with this roster? And he said no. So, is that not in theory contradicting himself?
He actually said he thought he did do a good enough job with the roster. So somebody asked him, did you do a good enough job with this roster? And he said, yeah, I think that there's a lot of talent here. But then they immediately asked him, okay, if the talent's not the problem, is coaching the problem? And he didn't really say anything that would instill you a bunch of confidence in Brian Dable. So it was overall a confusing press conference. You're right. He was kind of flip-flopping on some things. But the fact that he sat there and told everybody that he likes the roster and it has enough talent, but then couldn't provide an explanation as to why that talent isn't rising to the occasion. Dude, at some point, you just have to be honest and say, I didn't do a good enough job putting a good roster on the field. I don't know. It almost felt like he threw Dable under the bus, which pisses me off because the way that I'm now interpreting the season and last season as well, Brian Dable got Daniel Jones forced upon him. Joe Shane made a mistake to extend that guy, and I feel really bad for Dable because I think he is a good coach who is going to probably get fired at some point in the next 2 years because of one mistake that his general manager made. It's not even his fault, but he's going to get fired because Daniel Jones is terrible. That's not his fault that Daniel Jones is terrible. It's the GM's fault for signing Daniel Jones.
I was just going to say, you kind of took the words out of my mouth, but I was going to say, this feels like it's trending towards maybe not this year, but at some point that Brian Dable is going to be the scapegoat and that Joe Shane's going to get to hire another head coach.
That's how it feels for me too. And again, I think that's completely unfair to Brian Dable. I think that would be a mistake. I think if you're going to fire one, you have to fire both at this point. But I think they're both going to be back in 2025. Joe Shane was very clear that he's confident he'll be back and that he communicates with ownership. They believe in the vision, all this crap. So I think they're both going to be back. But man, I don't know. The mistakes that Joe Shane has made, he right now, and he did this during the press conference, he kept highlighting this rookie draft class. He kept saying, well, we got Tyrone Tracy, and we got Newbin, and we got Neighbors. And it's like, okay, but you still lost Barkley and McKinney. Imagine if you had these guys plus those guys, he just kept defaulting to look at this great work that I did in the 2024 NFL draft. And it's like, yeah, you hit on all these talents and you still didn't get a quarterback. So did you do all that great work that you said you did? I don't know. It was a job-saving draft. Absolutely. A great draft class. But the great draft class and all the instant impact from these rookies playing 99% of snaps on defense highlights how bad the roster really is. So what great job has he done?
Another great point. If you're at a spot where you need all these guys to come in and play, maybe before some are ready to, and that's not to discredit like the picks that he's clearly hit on from this draft. Like there was some nice work done in the 2024 draft for the Giants, but also can we not point out that they've probably put some of these young kids in spots they're not ready for because of deficiencies at other areas?
Yeah, I mean, Tyler Newbin playing 99% of the team's defensive snaps. 99%. He's a second-round rookie. That's ridiculous. And I actually thought it was funny because at one point he was asked about Deonte Banks, and he was discussing the struggles that he had. And he said, well, I didn't think he had an effort problem on that CeeDee Lamb touchdown. The safety took a bad angle. And I'm like, yeah, that's your safety that you took that's playing 99% of snaps. And he mentioned that Newbin is playing 99% of snaps and leading the team in tackles while answering a question about letting McKinney walk. So I'm like, you are highlighting the problems with this roster. You are highlighting your major mistakes in the offseason. And you're just kind of selling this lie to the fans. The press conference just really pissed me off. I don't think it pissed off most fans. I think most of them felt okay about it. But for me, I thought he was highlighting just how bad of a general manager job he's done over the last 3 years on multiple occasions.
I kind of like this comment from Rico. He says the Hard Knocks focus on the Giants front office was a terrible mistake. Giants fans questioned decisions. Then seeing them fumble on TV made it that much more critical. Never wished that on the Jets. Now, I really liked the peek behind the curtain that show gave us, but seeing Brian Dable fawn over some of those quarterbacks and then for them not to get a quarterback is tough. Now we saw they tried to trade up with the Patriots. Like that was also put in there, but they loved Neighbors too. They made that very clear in the show, but it was slightly awkward to see how much they liked some of these quarterbacks and them to not end up with one and go, all right, Daniel's going to be our guy again.
No, I think it is embarrassing. I don't mind it because I thought the TV show was awesome. I wish I could get that every single year so that I could properly evaluate this Giants front office. I mean, there's so much to dig into there, but they did try. You can give them credit. They tried to get a quarterback in the first round. But for me, I don't think they tried hard enough. I think they should have offered more. I mean, how many opportunities are you going to get in striking distance to move up and get that quarterback? They should have sent the Godfather offer to the Patriots and gotten Drake May. Why not? What did you have to lose? Joe Shane's biggest mantra is scared money don't make money. Well, you looked a little scared during that draft. That's how I interpreted that whole thing. And on top of that, another thing that he said during the press conference, he was asked, would you have made any changes to the quarterback position? Like if you could go back and reevaluate what you did in the offseason, were there any changes that you would have made? He said, nope. Are you kidding me? I mean, you had 7 rounds in this draft. You didn't take a quarterback in any of the rounds. That right there is a mistake because Brian Dable, again, had Daniel Jones forced upon him. He was brought here to be this quarterback whisperer, take a young talent and develop it. And you haven't given him a young talent at any point in the last 3 years. Even if we're talking about a fifth-round pick on Spencer Rattler, it's better than nothing. At least he has a young project to develop. And that's not even something that prevents you from drafting a quarterback next year. So why didn't the Giants add a rookie? Even if we're talking 7th round, Joe Milton, take somebody, just take someone and give give Brian Dable someone to develop. And I don't know, again, just the fact that he said that he would make no changes and he has no regrets over the quarterback position. I get it. It's what he's supposed to say. I would prefer to hear him say, I need to reevaluate my decision-making process at the quarterback position.
But also, too, could they not have signed someone who at quarterback 2 who's maybe a little bit more serious to push Daniel
Absolutely.
Jones? Like Locke is probably a better option, but like not a serious contender. If they retained Tyrod, if they signed Sam Darnold, or if they signed Russell Wilson, who we brought up a lot, like someone Justin Fields, like whatever it was. It just didn't feel like they took backup quarterback very seriously.
Hell, even Kenny freaking Pickett.
Yeah.
That guy was available for what, a 6th-round pick, and now he's on the Eagles. I mean, anybody. They didn't put any effort to bring in a high upside quarterback, and they went with Drew Lock, and they've seemed very hesitant to even put him on the field throughout the season because they don't believe in him. So why sign a quarterback you don't believe in? What really it broke down to, they pinched pennies on Tyrod Taylor. They let him go for what, a raise of $3 million. Man, that is $3 million that I absolutely would have been happy spending. I think you absolutely need to ensure that your quarterback is capable of pushing your starting quarterback as a backup. So just an egregious mistake all across the board with the quarterback position. I don't understand how they messed this up so badly, but Joe Shane's sitting up there and saying he has no regrets and he doesn't feel like he made any mistakes. Well, I hope that John Mara disagrees.
Yeah, I don't know. John Mara clearly was upset with Saquon Barkley leaving in that show, and I wonder if he's going to hold that against this regime, seeing the success that he's had in Philadelphia. This isn't me saying like, oh, the Giants should have forked over, all that money, but just how disappointed he came across in that show, and to see it working with the Eagles and, the Giants having the season that they are. My first thought is kind of just like, is he going to go back on his word from earlier in the year like he did a few years ago?
Yeah, I don't know if the Saquon Barkley thing is gonna factor into that, just because, truthfully, Tyrone Tracy has been excellent, and I think that's going to soften the blow there. Like, obviously, Tracy and Barkley aren't really comparable. I mean, Barkley is by far the better player, but still, Tyrone Tracy is a good player. They found him in the 5th round, and Joe Shane's going to be able to use that as a rebuttal to any conversation about Saquon Barkley. However, the other part of your statement there that I find interesting, will John Mara go back on his word? I absolutely think that's possible. And like I said, I think on the last episode, the way that I'm now interpreting his comments about waiting till the end of the season and being patient, not expecting any firings, the way that I look at it now, he's waiting until the end of the year. Then he's going to do a review and then decide whether or not he's going to make any firings. I don't think these guys are 100% safe going into 2025. I think once we get into this offseason, John Mara is going to look around. What kind of GM candidates are available? What kind of head coaching candidates are available? Do they bring us a higher ceiling and a higher floor? I think is actually more important for this team than what we have currently. And if Bill Belichick comes over to John Mara's house and says, hey, I really want to coach this team, I absolutely think he can be swindled and he will go ahead and fire everybody. But I just think it's too soon to say that these guys are safe. Wait till the end of the year, see where the record finishes, because the Giants haven't had a number 1 pick in like 60 years. If they end up with the 1st overall pick, I don't know how that's not a serious indictment on the regime, the front office, the coaching staff. How do you not fire everybody at that point? But I don't want them to, but I'm just saying from the ownership's perspective, it's really hard not to fire some people if you have the number 1 pick in the draft. So I think we'll see what happens in the offseason. There's nothing telling me that their future is safe.
And it would be pretty enticing for a GM and head coach candidate to come in there with the number 1 pick and have, be able to pick their guy or go, whatever route it is you want to take someone, trade back, you have a ton of options.
Exactly. It'll be a much more attractive coaching destination than it's been in the last 3 times that they've hired a head coach since Tom Coughlin left. And one other point that I want to make, though, and this is a little bit like thinking too far ahead, but I think it's worth bringing up anyway. Whatever the Giants do this upcoming offseason at quarterback, they can't be married to. And what I mean by that is when they drafted Daniel Jones in 2019, they were married to him. They were like, we're giving him at least 3 years. We're going to give him plenty of time to just get it right. However, they fired his head coach after his rookie season. Pat Shurmur was gone. So they bring in a new coach, and they try their best to make it work with Joe Judge. But because they were so married to Daniel Jones, he's here all the way into year 6. He was forced upon 3 head coaches. Whatever the Giants do in this upcoming draft, if they draft Cam Ward with the number 1 overall pick, but after 1 season, Cam Ward doesn't play well, and Brian Daboll gets fired, let the new guy come in and pick his own quarterback. Don't be married to the quarterback just because you're hell-bent on developing him. Don't force him onto a new head coach. Trade him while you still can in 2026 because he'll probably still be worth a second-round pick. But by the time you get to 2027, he's worthless. So don't be married to it. Don't force this quarterback upon the coaches like you did with Daniel Jones. Give carte blanche to these guys. That's how the Giants need to operate. Let the coaches just make their decisions and move on from players regardless of where they were drafted.
I like it. I think that's a good place to end the show. We did a lot of deep dive on the Giants' future and the state of their team. I'm sure by this time next week we could do something similar with the Jets on the bye week. We'll be back on Monday to recap the Jets and the Colts. We'll also get into some more Giants stuff. But that'll do it for us on this episode. You can follow me on socials at Matt O'Leary NY and on my YouTube channel there. You can follow Anthony on his social media and over on Fireside Giants. That'll do it. I'm Matt. He's Anthony. We'll catch you next time.